I've been working all my life. I saved every dollar. I did everything right. But when it came time for me to get what was mine, I got nothing. Hello. I hope you found this story interesting. Your feedback, suggestions, and subscriptions are always welcome. George Weston sat in his chair looking at his laptop screen. He reopened his bank account, even though he already knew the number there. $300,000, his retirement savings, his guarantee, his peace of mind. He had done everything right. He worked as an engineer for 30 years. Every month he saved a part of his salary to the fund. He took out an additional pension program. He was told, "Don't worry. Your future is secure." And he believed. Tomorrow he was to make his first withdrawal. Come on, George, time to enjoy life," he said to himself, raising his glass of wine. He was 71. His children were grown. His grandchildren were grown. Now he could travel, pursue his hobbies, live for himself. He even had his eye on a small house in Florida. Not a mansion, but cozy. He closed his eyes and imagined it, the sun, palm trees, the peace. Life was exactly as he had planned it. At 7 a.m, the phone rang. "Mr. Weston, it's Linda from your pension fund." Yes, I'm listening." "We need to discuss your account." "What's going on?" "Anaya, please come by our office today." "It's urgent." George opened his account. The balance $300,000. Everything looked normal. Probably some bureaucratic nonsense, he muttered as he got dressed. Not a he left the house, not even realizing that the next time he came back, he would be returning to a completely different world. In a few hours, his future would turn into his worst nightmare. You can spend your whole life building a solid foundation. But if one brick turns out to be rotten, the whole building will collapse in an instant. George Weston walked into the office of his pension fund. The woman behind the desk nodded at him. "Mr. Weston, come in." He sat down in the office across from the manager, Linda Mason. She looked very tense. "You scared me, Linda." George tried to smile. She was silent for a long time. Your account." "Yes. There's no more money in it." George blinked. What?" Linda folded her arms of the foundation. "We've lost assets." You did what?" "Your money is gone, Mr. Weston." George felt his insides go cold. No, there must be some mistake." "I'm afraid not." George took out his phone and opened the bank's app. His balance $0. He froze. You're joking." Linda shook her head. "I really wish this was a joke." "But where did the money go?" "The foundation went bankrupt." How Linda sighed. "The investments didn't pay off. The market crashed." "It's impossible." George felt like he was running out of air. "Your fund was guaranteed." Linda gave him a guilty look. "We're not obligated to compensate for losses. It was in the contract." George punched the table. "You mean to tell me that I've been paying you for decades, and now I'm just left with nothing?" Linda nodded. I'm sorry." Sorry. He felt like his whole life was falling apart right now. What do you do when your financial airbag turns out to be just an illusion? And who is responsible for that? Just because someone smiles at you doesn't mean they're telling you the truth, especially if that smile belongs to a financial advisor. George sat in his chair, feeling his world crumble. In front of him was Linda Mason, a representative of the pension fund. She looked far too calm for the person who had just told him that his money was gone. "Let's go over it again," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "You're saying my account is zeroed out?" Linda nodded. "Yes. And what can I do?" She looked down. There's not much you can do." George gripped the armrests of his chair. You mean to tell me that I've been investing for 30 years, and now I'm just left with nothing?" "I'm so sorry." He slammed his palm on the table. "This is theft," Linda sighed. "We didn't break the law." "You didn't. You stole my money." Linda took a file from the table. "You signed a contract, Mr. Weston." She pulled out the document and showed him the fine print. "The company is not responsible for losses related to market risks and liquidation of the fund." George felt his hands shake. "Did you know?" Linda looked down again. We could not have foreseen such a crash." George rose slowly. "You knew this could happen, but you still convinced me to invest." She was silent. "You told me that my pension plan was sound. It was standard practice, and a standard practice." He felt anger building in his chest. "You had a chance to tell me the truth, but you lied." Linda rubbed her temples nervously. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Weston." But what did he care if she was sorry? His money was gone, and no one was going to be responsible for it. We build our future thinking we have control over it. But one day you wake up and realize that control was an illusion. George walked out of the pension fund office, feeling like his legs were not listening. The sun was shining outside, people were rushing to work, life was in full swing. But his world had stopped. He no longer had money. He no longer had a future. He sat down on a bench, pulled out his phone, and opened his banking app. His balance $0. He read the number again, as if it might change if he looked at it longer. But it didn't. His account was empty. "Okay, let's think about it," he muttered. He had worked all his life. He had a house, he had insurance. He had kids. Everything would be fine, right? He called the bank. "Hi, my name is George Weston. I have a problem." "I'm listening." "My retirement account, it's zeroed out. What can I do?" Pause. "I'm sorry, Mr. Weston, but if the fund is closed, we can't help you." "But it's my money." "You signed a contract." Fuck the contract." "Oh, no, I've worked my ass off. I understand your situation, Mr. Weston. I can advise you to contact social services." George hung up. Social services. He, a man who had worked all his life, now had to ask for help. And this was only the beginning. There were more blows ahead. You can lose money. You can lose your job, your savings, even your health. But nothing hurts more than being betrayed by those you've worked for all your life. George returned home devastated. His bank account was empty. No pension. The bank would not help, but he kept telling himself, "Okay, I have a house. I'm not on the street. I'll think of something." He sat down at the kitchen table and sighed. He had to call his son Tom. "Dad?" Tom's voice was warm as usual. "Hi, son. I'm in trouble." "What's wrong?" George told him everything. Tom didn't say anything. "Dad, are you sitting down?" "What, you can't live in your house?" "Oh, why not?" "We sold it." "Quiet." We didn't know this was going to happen." George almost dropped the phone. "You sold my house." Tom spoke quickly, confused. "You signed a power of attorney a few years ago, remember?" George gritted his teeth. "I authorized you to do the taxes, not sell the house." "We thought you'd agree to that." "You thought." His own son sold the house without telling him. You betrayed me, Tom." "Dad, you have some of the money. We were trying to help you. I didn't get a dime of it." "And we spent it on your medical treatment." George suddenly remembering he had been sick last year, and Tom had paid for the clinic. But he didn't ask where the money came from. "You sold my house so I could survive." "Dad, I'm sorry." George hung up the phone. He was officially homeless. And worst of all, thanks to his own children. When you fall down, you hope someone will lend a hand. But what if everyone just watches you lie there? George sat in his car, crying and devastated. His retirement savings were gone. His house was sold. His life no longer belonged to him. He took a deep breath and pulled out his phone. If the system worked, he could get help. Right? He dialed the social services number. Hello, my name is George Weston. I just found out I lost my pension. We're sorry to hear that. How can we help you? I don't know. What should I do? Have you received a state pension before? No, I had a savings program. Well, then you are not eligible for social benefits. I'm sorry, what? You don't meet the criteria for assistance. George felt his hand shake. So I paid taxes for 50 years, and now I'm not entitled to anything. You can file a request, but the procedure will take more than a year. What about a lawsuit? The woman cite whom? Against the pension fund! The law does not oblige them to compensate for losses. But they stole my money. It was all in the contract. The George closed his eyes. I don't have a home. You can go to an asylum. I don't want a shelter. I want my life back. We're really sorry. Sorry. He was alone. And no one was going to save him. Once upon a time, the car was just a means of transportation, and now it is my home. Although no home is something warm and cozy, and here there is only cold and hopelessness. George was driving his old Toyota Camry, parked in a dark parking lot near a supermarket. It was his first night away from home. He didn't know what to do, where to go, to his children. No, they had betrayed him. A hotel. He couldn't afford it. An asylum. That seemed humiliating. He looked in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at him seemed like a stranger. It was cold. He covered himself with an old jacket, trying to keep warm. I've been working all my life. Now I sleep in the car. His fingers clutched the steering wheel convulsively. He remembered when he bought the car. How he took his grandchildren to the park. How, when he was young, he had taken his wife on a first date. His wife. If she had been alive, this would not have happened. George saw a shiny Mercedes pull into the parking lot. A man in an expensive suit got out without even noticing him. The world moved on, and George simply became invisible. It was only the first night. What would happen tomorrow, and the next week, and in a month? How long can you survive in a car? They say that the truth always wins. But the longer I searched for justice, the more I doubted, what if it simply does not exist? George sat in the corridor of the state legal service, clutching a folder of documents. His story had finally gotten a lot of publicity. The newspapers had written about the scam that had wiped out his retirement savings. Television was discussing the collapse of a fund that had taken money from thousands of pensioners. He thought this was his chance, his opportunity to get his life back. The glasses-wearing lawyer flipped through the documents without looking up. You want to file a lawsuit? Yes. Against whom? Against the pension fund that stole my money. The lawyer sighed. The fund does not officially exist, but its owners do. Yes, but their capital has disappeared. George closed his eyes. This is fraud. It's legally protected fraud. What are you saying? The lawyer shrugged. They took advantage of legal loopholes. So they won't go to jail? I don't think so. George gritted his teeth. And the money? There's no money. No one will be held accountable. The lawyer shook his head. What am I supposed to do now? The lawyer looked at him with a ruthless, empty stare. What? Look for other options. To apply to charitable organizations. You mean, just accept it? The lawyer did not answer. George stood up. He realized that justice is just a word, and if you want to find it, you have to look for it yourself. I used to think I knew how things worked. Work, save, be honest, and the system will take care of you. But now I know the truth on this world was never mine. George was sitting on the same bench outside the supermarket where he had been looking at his banking app yesterday, disbelieving his zero balance. He had been through it all, or the loss of money, the betrayal of his children, disillusionment with the system that was supposed to protect him. And now what? He watched the people passing by. They didn't even look in his direction. An AA man who worked all his life, paid taxes, built a future had now become invisible. What could he do? He could have given up, apply for social assistance, go to a shelter, wait for handouts from the state. Or, he could start from scratch. He remembered his father's words. If they throw you out the door, climb out the window. George took a deep breath. He would get up. He would find a job. Any job. He would not give up. The world was no longer his home. But he could make his own world. Life is not only about what you have. It's about what you do when everything is lost. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel, and maybe some of us still have a chance.